Hello, my name is James Brandon Lewis. I'm a saxophonist and composer, coming to you live from Brooklyn. Um, basically, just going to share a few things with you. I would like to thank Ms. Gail Boyd for having me for at Alternative Venues for Jazz. So, where do I begin? Well, I'm 38 years old. I hail from Buffalo, New York. Um, for all the New York City people, that is in the state. It's Western New York, close to Toronto, Canada. And thank you, Ms. Boyd, for having me. Um, basically, I grew up Buffalo, New York. Went to performing arts school from fifth grade to 12th. My mom was a school teacher in Buffalo public schools. My dad's a Baptist minister, and basically, she saw my love for music at a young age. If you're from Buffalo and you play the sax, you can't escape the influence of Grover Washington Jr. He was from there, born and raised there, and then he moved to Philly. Shout out to all my Philly people. And I would say my entree into music is because of my mom. She, I guess, she noticed that I had a had a love or an affinity for music, specifically in films. Um, Let me see. When I was a kid, we had like Mr. Holland's Opus. Um, I still remember that clarinet melody. You know. So I was always attracted to that. My first instrument was clarinet. Um, I pretty much had a normal upbringing. Um, Music was very intricate in my life as far as going to church, being in choir, um, that kind of thing. I remember, well, long story short, I remember specifically learning the clarinet. My mom, she didn't want to teach me at her school. She was a teacher, and this was about fourth grade. So she asked me, would you like to learn an instrument? Because I would be going in the fifth grade. And she taught fifth and sixth, and she did not want me to be a student of hers. And so I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so she goes and tells the teacher, well, I want my son to play this. And he's like, oh, yeah, I have the perfect instrument, and hands me a clarinet. And that's when the journey just started, the curiosity. I remember I was in wind ensemble, learning, you know, um, different music from Rent, West Side Story, um, all these different kinds of things. And I remember specifically, eventually, and I used to play my clarinet at church as well. So that was always an adventure. I don't know what I sounded like, but it was cool. They had a lot of patience for me at my church. Shout out to Metropolitan United Methodist Church in Buffalo, New York. Um, so eventually, one summer, I was heading to Colorado to visit my dad and my stepmom, and this was about like when I was about 11 and 12, and en route um, to Colorado, we stopped at a rest stop, and somebody was selling some pets, or whatever, dog, and my sister and I, of course, were like, "Hey, Dad, can we get a dog?" And we're excited. So we end up getting this dog, and we make our way to Colorado, where my dad was living at the time. And a few weeks, like maybe a week or two go by, and one of my dad's friends somehow, hello, 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 somehow we got on the conversation of me playing clarinet, and the gentleman says, when my dad's friend says, "Oh, I have an alto sax." I said, wow, he's got an alto sax. And mind you, I'm like 11 years old. I'm like, and at that time, I definitely knew about, different people, Charlie Parker, and all that. So um, he brings out the alto sax. It was a Buescher 400. I said, wow, And so my dad's friend, we had our dog with us, and he was digging our dog. So I was just like, in my mind, I said, well, it's an easy swap. Let's switch out this, this pet for this instrument. You can have our dog. Let me have the alto sax. I don't even think my sister got a vote. And so that began this journey, another journey in music. So I got back to Buffalo after the summer was over with, and I had a little paper route at the time, just enough to get to buy my first record. After I was taking private music lessons with Carol McLaughlin. Shout out to Carol McLaughlin, Buffalo, one of Buffalo legends. And I remember in my first lesson, he said to me, you should go buy some recordings, go buy some Charlie Parker, so on and so forth. And I went to Record Theater in Buffalo. I still remember, what that store smells like. I was just, I'm 12 years old, because my birthday is in August. So I was 11 at the time that I got the sex, and then I would later turn 12. So I'm in there, and I think I bought the Charlie Parker All Stars recording. And I can't remember all the personnel and everything like that, but because my mind is not, I have never been good with memorizing those kinds of things. But I remember taking the album home, or the CD, but albums and CDs still existed when I was a kid. I'm 38. I'll be 39 this year, but you still had album CDs. So this was like right before the MP3 takeover, streaming, and all that would happen. So I remember taking this recording home, Charlie Parker, and I remember my alto sax is sitting on the bed, and I put the CD in the CD player, and I was like, wow, I wasn't inspired initially. I was more so intimidated, because I was like, wow, is this what the sax, is this what it's supposed to sound like, can sound like? I definitely don't sound like that. So that began this whole another layer. Eventually the inspiration would come, and I had a lot of different mentors and influences, and my mom was very encouraging. My parents, my dad, stepmom, grandparents, they were all very encouraging over the years. The same thing with my brother and my sister. And so I remember just feeling like, at the time when I was younger, music was a good escape. It was a great escape. Just a whole nother world. I just became immersed in it. I had an uncle who would expose me to Jazz Times and Downbeat magazines, and I was 12, reading those and getting an education that way. So, and shout out to my Uncle Carl. So those experiences, those were like my comic books. I was just like, wow, like as much music as possible. I would have different box sets of, I remember I had this box set. It was like all of the legends of jazz. It had Charlie Parker, it had Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, had Sonny Rollins, Art Pepper, Jerry Mulligan, Don Byas. It just had everybody in just one box set. And I used to just wear that thing out. And eventually, but for me, it was always about the emotion, the emotion of what the music was saying and what it was conveying to me. And that spoke volumes. And Buffalo is a groove town. I love where I'm from. I'm proud of where I'm from. Um, Shout out to all of the amazing people there, and Colored Musicians Club that still exists there. If you ever go to Buffalo, visit that club, historic club, um, basically founded by some musicians at a certain time in life when wasn't a blacks weren't allowed to be a part of um, the union, so they formed their own union, their own club, and it just recently got its own historical landmark. The whole registration with the United States, so it's a landmark. So if you get a chance, go there, support that club, uh, and many other places in Buffalo. It's really phenomenal in supporting music. And a lot of great people. You had Grover Washington Jr. Um, who else? Charles Gale. You had Andy DeFranco, Rick James, some of the members of Soul Live, that group. The list goes on and on. Junie Booth, um, so on and so forth. So just a rich legacy. And apologies if I'm missing anyone. But so yeah, I just grew up. My mom would take me to go see jazz every week at the Buffalo Science Museum, as well as Albright Knox Art Gallery. In front they had the summer series, and that's when I was exposed to Bobby Militello, alto sax player who played with Dave Brubeck. I would hear so many great bands just as a kid coming through Buffalo, playing at the Albright Knox Art Gallery. So my mom would take me, right after church, hey, you want to go hear some jazz? I'm like, cool, yeah, let's go. So I was exposed to that. Definitely have to thank my mom for doing stuff like that. I was fortunate. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's been a great journey. Um, Buffalo Academy for the Visual and Performing Arts. Wow, what can I say? To do music all day as a kid, of course I had math and science and all of that, but that was a joy to be around not only just musicians, be around dancers, be around visual artists. It just really shaped my view, of being an artist, like a holistic kind of thing. And so that was very, very inspiring, and had a lot of opportunities. I remember um, I sang in the choir, 5th and 6th grade, sang in the choir, and we did a holiday pops concert with Dave Brubeck. I was like, wow, I was amazed, um, completely, completely amazed. And then one year we did it with Doc Severson. And I remember my friends and I, we were at Kleinhans. I think it was at Kleinhans Music Hall. And we were hearing Doc warm up. We was like, oh, we was getting hyped. We was in the back getting hyped, because we just love music so much. And that was the thing. I was always immersed. Gospel music was a part of my upbringing as well. I had a gospel group. Actually, a lot of people don't know this, but I had my jazz influences, the Charlie Parkers, and then eventually it would be, of course, John Coltrane. I went through different phases, different chunks of people. So in high school, of course, I was listening to pretty much everybody, but eventually the tenor saxophone came about because the band instructor needed tenor saxophonists. They had graduated, so I picked up the tenor maybe my junior year of high school, and that was amazing. And so, but back to the gospel music. So most people don't even know this, but one of my first influences on the alto sax for gospel music was Angela Christie. Amazing, just an amazing saxophonist. And I was like, wow, okay, cool, because I was trying to find that medium of where I could like bridge the gap between playing jazz and playing gospel music, and finding those influences. Also, I had a instrumental group at the time called Brandon and Brandon. Shout out to Brandon Felder, phenomenal pianist. Played at the National Prayer Service twice. The 2 years Obama was 2 consecutive times when Obama was in office. So shout out to Brandon Felder. But it was piano and sax, and that we were inspired by another group called Allen and Allen. That was a whole nother gospel instrumental group. So lots of music, lots of fun times, lots of different bands. Um, just like the normal, kind of just the normal trajectory of of being a musician. Learning the craft, learning how to read, learning your scales. Eventually, I would end up. Well, it was interesting because I think that sometimes when I'm over the course of the pandemic, had opportunity to teach a couple of students via Zoom, and I'm always encouraging, the student to stay the course, don't get discouraged, and to be resilient. Um, there's a lot of ups and downs in music. When I was a kid, I would think I just loved it so much. I wasn't thinking about the trials and tribulations and the things that would come with pursuing pursuing what you love, and the sacrifices that it takes for that love, and the dedication, and those moments when I wanted to maybe play basketball with my friends, but knowing I got this recital coming up, um, that I should, hey, I can't play basketball, got to be dedicated, got to learn this music. So when I'm talking to young people, it's one of those things of just encouraging them to stick with it. There was a trajectory and a work ethic. When I came out of Buffalo Academy for the Visual and Performing Arts, that was my first reality check on what we say middle class. What the middle class is. So my parents we weren't rich enough to send me to school. We weren't poor enough to get any aid. And so what was interesting is that I got accepted to Berkeley. I got accepted to a bunch of different schools. Wasn't able to go to Berkeley, and I spent a year at a state school. And that was an experience. That was pretty funny because my mom was an elementary school teacher on Buffalo State's campus at a place called Campus West. So every day as a freshman, I'm going to school with my mom. Now, that used to trip me out, because we'd be going and she dropped me off, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, why am I, I wanted a change, shout out to Buffalo State, they're good at what they do. I just needed a change, meaning I just wanted to see what was out here in the world, to be challenged, to be away from my friends, to be away from my mom, and away from rules and all that, and to explore life. So a friend of mine, this same friend, Brandon Felder, came home from Howard. He starts telling me about the legacy of Howard University. He's like, Benny Golson went there, Wallace Roney went there, Jerry Allen went there. He starts just a laundry list of who's who. I'm like, wow, you think I could get into that school? And it was really beautiful. I ended up auditioning. And I got accepted. And I got exactly what I was looking for. You see that progression, I tell the young people, it's steps. Now I spent a year at a state school. Then I went to Howard University. And the steps didn't stop. So while I'm at Howard University, I remember my first, like everybody at Howard could play, even people who weren't even musicians. In the music program, everybody could play, and I remember at the time, the people in the band with me, we had McClenny Hunter on drums, we had Eric Wheeler on bass, We had Musina on keys. Um, we had my man Taylor Pace, another keyboardist. We had a lot of just amazing people. Um, shout out to Steve Thomas, one of my good friends who's a phenomenal educator in New York City. So we just had, the band was just loaded and everybody could play. And I remember speaking with, before I came there, speaking with Professor Charlie Young, phenomenal alto sax player. Just really, what can I say about him other than a beast? So I remember, he wanted me to play a little bit. I played for him, and I said, well, what did you think? He said, honestly, you can't play. I said, wow, and I was humbled. I wasn't humble. I was humbled. I wasn't discouraged. I was humbled. And I was determined, you see, because that's kind of that's that Buffalo coming out. We determined, we kind of got that like little underdog vibe, to our advantage. And so, but I was ready, I was ready. I was up for the challenge. And I had beautiful time at Howard, some amazing, got to go overseas to Japan the first time, played the Kennedy Center Honors. We would have Grady Tate was there when I was a student. We'd have people just visit there. Jason Moran would come, different people. My last concert, my last spring concert there, we backed Jerry Allen, Wallace Roney, and Benny Golson. So that was a phenomenal time period. Just shedding, working on the craft, getting better. Eventually, I would graduate, and that's when another music happened. Some more music. The phone wasn't ringing off the hook. So I had to figure it out. And, I had to figure out what were my goals? How did I see a career in music happening? I knew I wanted to play, but I knew I had more work to do. You always got work to do. This is a life's work. There is no there. There's an always ongoing ness to continue to work and work and work, and perfect your craft, and surround yourself. Let me just dial it back for a second. Before I went to Howard, when I was in Buffalo, it's not really a place where we talking about a bunch of genres. We playing everything there. It's like just a hodgepodge of a lot of different musical influences. And it was inspiring. It was just a place, a solid place to learn, where people they're not going to criticize you. They criticize you, but with a loving hand, And I remember going to a place called Hall Walls. Shout out to Hall Walls. And shout out to my man, Steve Betchkowski, doing phenomenal work there, bringing different acts there. And, bringing people like William Parker, Wadada Leo Smith, so on and so forth. And when I was a kid, I remember Steve bringing over Odine Pope to my high school. I was like, wow, man, this cat was one of John Coltrane's friends. I'm about to meet this dude. Let's go. So you fast forward, and I remember checking out his music. His specifically, I remember him coming to Buffalo, and he brought his saxophone choir works. I said, wow, and he used the local musicians. He used my teacher. I had a couple teachers in there. I was like, wow, this is dope. This was some real community vibe. And that was my first exposure to, let's see, if you say music on the fringes, on the fringes. So anyways, I graduated Howard. Before I graduated Howard, I met a sax player by the name of Kelly Corbin. Kelly Corbin. My mom, when I graduated, she took me on a cruise. I was going to see the jazz. Wherever the jazz was, that's where I was at. So every night I'm watching Kelly Corbin, I'm listening to him play. I'm like, wow, man, this dude, he's telling me about his influences. He's telling me about Chris Potter. He's telling me all these things. Eventually, in keeping a relationship with Kelly Corbin over the years, he would tell me about CalArts. I said, man, what's CalArts? He was like giving me the rundown. It's this kind of school. You got to be, got to be open. You got to be this, got to be that. I'm like, okay, cool. I ain't really see what he was talking about, but I thought, wow, this seems like a hip school. Next thing you know, I eventually get accepted. I'm working with Charlie Hayden. I'm working with Joe LaBarbera, Alfonso Johnson, and then I'm exposed to like Harry Parch and James Tenney and just all of this whole other thing. And then I'm talking to Charlie Hayden, and we talking about Ornette. And so that was another education, So I've been blessed to get the full continuum of the music. One of my first gigs after grad school was playing with Alfonso Johnson, playing original Weather Report stuff, seeing the arrangements, seeing, how Wayne Shorter wrote music, like, wow, man, this joint looking like an orchestral score, And so I've had a lot of blessed experiences. Eventually, that would lead me to I went to Banff in 2009. That was a beautiful experience. Shout out to Dave Douglas. But there was a progression. Now, the first time, let me tell the student, the first time I got denied by CalArts. Then I applied again. You see, you got to have that tenacity. Got to keep going, keep moving, stay on the grind, learn as much as you can. But while I was at CalArts, I became exposed to more of the continuum. My first semester there, Wadada Leo Smith was on sabbatical, so I had John Lindbergh, shout out to John Lindbergh, and I had Don Moye from Art Ensemble. So that was just like, I'm like, wow, let's go. More learning, more growing, more being curious. Never put a cap on your curiosity. Just keep it moving and always ask questions. Nothing wrong with asking questions. I used to think back in the days when they would say, that's true when they say there's no such thing as a dumb question, especially if you don't have the answers. You know the answers to it, so you got to ask. So anyways, I would eventually see a magazine walking through the halls like CalArts, Signal to Noise, and Matthew Shipp was on this magazine. I'm reading the magazine. I said, wow, man, something in my soul told me I should meet this cat. I need to meet him. And then next thing you know, I go on a residency, the Atlantic Center for the Arts, and I'm studying with Matthew Shipp for 3 weeks. And we going over third string music. And I'm like, whoa. And then he asked me if I ever played with just a bass and a drum. I said, nah. He said, well, so he brought in some people who had worked with Sam Rivers Rhythm Section, Dave Matthews, and Michael Welch. And so we just killing, I started playing with them and I'm like, wow, man, my melodic line is just traveling, without accompaniment. I'm improvising. So eventually that experience with Matthew Shipp exposed me to William Parker, Gerald Cleaver. And while I was in California, there was 3 people who encouraged me to move to New York. It was James Newton, Matthew Shipp, and Wadada Leo Smith. And I said, wow, maybe I should move to New York. So 10 years ago, I moved to New York. And it's been amazing. It's been a wild, crazy journey. I've been learning a lot, getting a lot of opportunities to play with a lot of different amazing people. So now you know just a little bit, more about me. There's some nuance, some other little nuances in there, but I encourage the also, you can check out my latest album, Just a Wagon, if you would like. It's on Bandcamp via Tile Forms. Shout out to Tile Forms. And also, my project, Code of Being, is on Bandcamp too. Shout out to Intact Records. I forgot to mention that earlier. But thank you so much. Thank you for listening. That's a little part of my story. Thank you, Ms. Gail Boyd, for having me. Peace.